So the Office of Graduate Studies and Research falls under the direction of the Office of the Campus Registrar and the School for Graduate Studies and Research. Our main responsibilities are admissions, registration, scholarships, examinations of research papers, some research papers, and all theses. We are also responsible for graduation. Our office is also responsible for ensuring that the university's graduate regulations are adhered to, and all our programs are governed by these regulations. The regulations for graduate certificates, diplomas, and degrees booklet, as shown on the screen, is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 has to do with general regulations. Section 2 has to do with regulations for written examinations and coursework. And Section 3 has to do with regulations for the examination of research papers and project reports and theses. This booklet can be found on our website under the heading Forms and Documents. Now, to begin the regulations, I'm going to highlight what the booklet says about registration. It says all students are required to register each semester, and continuing students who fail to register are deemed to have withdrawn. Now, registration is one of our biggest challenges in the Office of Graduate Studies and Research, as many of our students are not remembering to register each semester. Just a reminder that students are required to register for all courses, research seminars, their theses, whatever they are pursuing in a semester, they are required to register for it. And normally the Office of the Campus Registrar sends out information about registration, for example, the deadline dates and the penalty fees associated with registration. The regulation also states that candidates who have submitted their theses, research papers, or projects before the end of a semester, but the examination of which has not been completed at the start of the following semester, must re-register in the new semester, but need only pay the applicable registration fee. And further in my presentation, I'll speak more on the applicable registration fee. Now, students may have a good reason for not registering. It may be medical reasons, personal reasons, financial or work-related reasons. In such a case, students are required to request leave of absence, and leave of absence will not be granted for more than 2 consecutive academic years. 2 consecutive academic years does not mean that is the total amount of time you can get leave of absence for during your program. It means that after 2 years of consecutive leave of absence, you are expected to return to your program of study at least for a semester before you can be considered for leave of absence again. Applications for leave of absence for a semester shall be submitted by the end of the 3rd week of the relevant semester, and applications for leave of absence for the academic year shall be submitted by the end of the 3rd week of semester 1. Now, leave of absence, late leave of absence requests attract a penalty fee of 4,000. It starts at 4,000 Jamaican dollars, and it can go up to a maximum of $16,000. So the longer you take to make a request for leave of absence, the penalty fee will increase. Now we'll move on to changes in registration, and the regulation states that a candidate registered for the MPhil degree who wishes to upgrade his or her registration to the PhD may apply after a period of 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time from the date of the initial registration, and should complete the upgrade of registration by the end of 3 years full-time and 5 years part-time from the date of initial registration. Now, although the regulation has stipulated the time period within which a student is required to request an upgrade, the regulation also allows students to request a waiver of the regulation if they have passed the stipulated time period. Now, a student would request a waiver of regulations by writing to the Office of Graduate Studies and Research. That request must be supported by your head of department as well as your supervisor and submitted to the Office of Graduate Studies and Research for review by the director and for onward submission to the Board for Graduate Studies and Research, as it's only the Board for Graduate Studies and Research that can approve a waiver of regulations. And a candidate who is registered for a taught master's degree may apply after a period of 1 semester for transfer of registration to the MPhil. We're still on changes in registration. It says, the regulation says a candidate registered for the MPhil PhD program who wishes to pursue a taught master's degree shall withdraw from the MPhil PhD program. And that withdrawal will be without penalty. And once a student withdraws, after which they may apply to pursue a taught master's degree. A candidate who is registered for the PhD and who has not yet submitted the thesis for examination may apply to the campus committee to change registration to MPhil and submit the thesis for examination for the MPhil degree. When this happens, the registration for the PhD will lapse and the registration for the MPhil will be deemed to have started from the date of the original registration for the MPhil PhD. So now we'll move on to time limits for registration. And the minimum period of registration for MPhil is 2 years full-time. And for part-time, for MPhil and professional doctorate is 4 years. For the PhD is 5 years part-time. For the professional doctorate, as well as the PhD, is 3 years full-time. And candidates for the MPhil are required to submit their thesis for examination within 3 years of their initial registration for full-time studies and 5 years for part-time studies. The regulation also states that candidates for the PhD and professional doctorate are required to submit their thesis for examination within 5 years of their initial registration for full-time studies and 7 years for part-time studies. And the minimum period of registration for a taught master's degree shall be 1 year for full-time students and 2 years for part-time students. And just a reminder that students are required to complete the taught courses that are persons pursuing taught master's degree. They are required to complete the taught courses before submitting their research paper or project reports for examination. The regulation also states that a candidate whose period of registration is about to end may apply for an extension of time. The extension of time form can be found on our website under the heading Forms and Document. The form should be completed by the student supervisor, as well as the head of department, and submitted to Office of Graduate Studies and Research for consideration by the director. Now we are moving on to withdrawal. The regulation states that where a student does not meet the final deadline for submission of any requirement for a graduate certificate, diploma, or degree, that student's registration and the right to re-registration shall expire at the end of the semester during which the final deadline occurs. Such students are deemed to have withdrawn. The regulation also states that students registered in graduate certificates, diplomas, taught master's degrees, or programs in which courses are delivered over a short period may, on account of poor performance, be required to withdraw. Now we're moving on now to readmission of candidates. The regulation says applicants deemed to have withdrawn may apply for readmission at any time. Applicants required to withdraw will be considered for readmission not less than 2 years after their withdrawal, unless the Board for Graduate Studies and Research in any particular case otherwise decides. And just to bring to your attention that there are 2 kinds of withdrawal: deemed to have withdrawn. For example, non-registration in a semester or academic year, you are deemed to have withdrawn from your program. Required to withdraw is when the university asks a student to withdraw. And normally, the university will ask a student to withdraw as a result of poor academic performance. The regulation also states that applicants readmitted may, with the approval of the campus committee, be credited with the courses passed during the applicant's previous registration, provided that not more than 5 years have lapsed since the date of expiry of the applicant's previous registration for those courses, or that the course content has not changed significantly. So although for deemed to have withdrawn, where it said the applicant deemed to have withdrawn may apply at any time, the regulation goes further to say not more than 5 years should lapse before you decide to come back in the program, because the possibility exists where you might have to start over the program from scratch. Still on readmission, the regulation says that in cases where a student has been required to withdraw through failure of a research paper or project report and is readmitted, the research paper or project report which is pursued must address a new topic. So we are moving on now to research seminars. And the regulation states that students enrolled for an MPhil degree must satisfactorily complete at least 2 research seminars prior to submission of their MPhil thesis. Students enrolled for a PhD degree must satisfactorily complete 3 such seminars. And for the PhD, the upgrade seminar can be counted as one of the 3 such seminars as long as it's not your last seminar. And for professional doctorates, students enrolled in professional doctorates must satisfactorily complete research seminars as specified in program requirements. Now we're on to plagiarism, and I'm sure everybody knows what plagiarism is. However, I'll read what the graduate regulations booklet says. It says, it means unacknowledged use of words, ideas, or creations of another, and includes situations where the student reuses without acknowledgement their own previously written texts, ideas, or creations when writing any new work. Now, there are 2 levels of plagiarism. Level 1 occurs when small quantities of the work are affected and or the breaches are minor. It includes cases of cosmetic or poor paraphrasing, negligent referencing, or incorrect or missing citations. Level 2 plagiarism occurs where large quantities of the work are affected and or the breaches are serious. It includes cases in which a significant amount of materials is borrowed or directly quoted or cosmetically paraphrased with no attribution at all, or attribution insufficient to indicate that the borrowed material is not the work of the student. Plagiarism in work which does not constitute a thesis or major project report. For example, your coursework assignment. The regulation says that once examiners are satisfied that level 1 plagiarism has been committed, they will levy a penalty in the form of a reduction in the marks, which would have otherwise been awarded. So for example, if an examiner would normally have awarded you a 70% in your coursework assignment, and he or she suspects plagiarism, you can reduce that mark to, for example, 65%, moving your grade from a A to a B+. And the regulation also says that plagiarism in theses and major project reports, this matter is referred to the Director for Graduate Studies and Research. And you can read further in the regulation to see what it says. When the director gets such a report, what actions she will be required to take. And plagiarism in theses, a major project report, or in work which does not constitute either a thesis or major project report, this matter too is also referred to the Director for Graduate Studies and Research. Now we are on to section 2 of the regulations, which has to do with written examinations and coursework. And the regulation says, in order to be successful in a course, as candidates are required to pass either the coursework or the written examinations and coursework. The regulation also says no candidate will be permitted to repeat the examination in any one course on more than one occasion. Candidates permitted a second attempt at a course will be required to rewrite only the component failed. So for example, you did a course that has a coursework component and an written examination component, and you failed the coursework component, you'll only be required to resit or redo the coursework aspect of the course. Oral examinations, the regulation says in cases where a student fails a written examination of a course within 5% of the pass mark, the examiners may recommend an oral examination to the chair of the campus committee. And just for noting that oral, it doesn't matter how well a candidate may have done at an oral examination, that candidate cannot get more than the minimum passing grade, which is 50%. And students who are dissatisfied with their examination results, written examination results, they would communicate with our examination section on that matter. So review, remark, those requests are handled by our examinations section. Section 3 of the regulations, we're on to this section which has to do with examination of research papers, project reports, and theses. Now, last week we had our user awareness seminar with regards to the electronic submission of theses and some research papers. The research papers that come to graduate studies and research is the MA Cultural Studies and the MSc Nutrition. All other research papers or projects are handled by the relevant respective departments. So we were informed that this portal is now live, and our students can now go ahead, and if they have papers or their thesis ready for submission, they can now go ahead and use it. Currently, previously, students used to have to come into graduate studies along with their supporting document to submit their thesis. This portal will allow you to sit at home and do all of that electronically. Examination of research papers and project reports. The regulation says candidates shall only be required to make corrections to research papers or project reports before the award of a final grade where minor corrections would enable an agreed margin of failure, 45 to 49%, to be awarded the minimum passing grade, which is 50%. The regulation also states that a research paper or project report which has been failed by the examiners will be allowed only one resubmission. The submission must be within a 6-month period following initial notification of the failure. Resubmitted research papers or project reports will only receive the minimum passing mark, which is 50%. Still on examination of research papers and project reports, the regulation says research papers or project reports assigned an A grade shall be deposited in the campus library. Research papers or project reports assigned a lesser grade may also be deposited on the recommendation of the supervisor to the campus committee. Examination of theses. The regulation says a candidate must submit for the approval of the campus committee the exact title of his or her thesis at the time when he or she applies for entry to the examination. An approved thesis title may not be changed except with the permission of the campus committee. And the student can request a thesis change by writing to the Office of Graduate Studies and Research with the new thesis title. That request must also be supported by your supervisor. The regulation says the MPhil candidate must have satisfactorily completed 2 seminars before applying for the examination of the thesis. The PhD candidate must have satisfactorily completed 3 seminars before applying for the examination of the thesis. And the thesis students, research students, would apply for their thesis, examination of their thesis using the graduate tracker that is on the portal is through SAS. So they will apply for their examination of the thesis through SAS using the graduate tracker. The professional doctorate candidate must have satisfactorily completed research seminars as specified in program and faculty regulations before applying for the examination of the thesis. And just to bring to your attention the deadline dates for submission of thesis, research papers, projects for the 2020-2021 academic year. For semester 2, the deadline date for submission is May 14, 2021, and the final date for the academic year is July 30th, 2021. August 1, a new academic year begins, and any submission on or after that date will attract the full tuition fee and miscellaneous fee. All right, fees for examination of research paper and project reports. Normally these fees are paid prior to submission of your paper for examination. And the fee for research paper, the examination fee for your research paper is $1,500. For MPhil is $2,000. For PhD and professional doctorate is $3,000. Now the PJ pending fee, remember I spoke earlier in my presentation about students who submit their thesis or research papers for examination, but the process is not completed at the beginning of a new semester. So you submitted your paper for examination in semester 1, and semester 2, the examination process is still not completed. Those students are required to pay only $2,000. They are given PJ pending status, meaning that you are waiting results from the examination of your thesis or research paper. And the thesis guide is an important booklet to have once you're pursuing research. The thesis guide provides you with information such as the layout of your thesis, the word limit, the length your thesis or research paper should be, the writing style, whether APA, Chicago Manual style. This booklet is on our website and it can be found under the heading Forms and Documents. Another important booklet to have in your possession, if you're a research student, the Graduate Studies Guide for Students and Supervisor. This booklet gives you information such as the role and responsibility of a supervisor and the role and responsibility of a student. This booklet also can be downloaded from our website under the heading Forms and Documents. And my final slide has to do with procedure for changing a supervisor. Now, there are times when the relationship between a student and a supervisor breaks down. When this happens, the student can speak with their head of department or head of section on the matter, but sometimes the head of section is the student supervisor. In these cases, the student may speak with the deputy dean or associate dean for graduate studies and research, or they may speak with the dean of their faculty, or there's a director for graduate studies and research. But sometimes students speak with one or two of these persons, but the relationship between themselves and the supervisor still hasn't improved. In such cases, a student may request a change of supervisor. And a student does that by writing to the Office of Graduate Studies and Research, requesting a change of supervisor. The Office of Graduate Studies and Research will in turn write the department requesting them to nominate a new supervisor for the student. Once that request from the department is received, it is passed to the Director for Graduate Studies and Research, after which the student is written to, informing him or her of the name of the new supervisor.